Yeah,
Do
my
I
consent.
have? Okay, that works. First question: how would you describe God?
How would I describe God? A lot of times we try to put God in a box. We try to put attributes to God. We try to make him like a grandfather figure or someone like that, but that's not who God is. At God's very basis, God is love. So everything that is good comes from God. Everything that that we would not consider evil is God. So God is the opposite of evil. God is good.
All right. Would you agree with Anselm's definition of God? Do you know what Anselm is?
I do not know off the top of my head. Do you want to give me a
Yes.
rundown?
Basically, he describes God as the greatest good to ever exist, like the greatest thought to ever exist. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, God, I mean, we hear in the scriptures and then we know from theology that God is good. There is no evil in God. There is no bad in God because God is the source of all things that are good. With that being said, that's why we as Christians, especially Catholic Christians, would say that God does not cause evil. That God doesn't necessarily like give people diseases, for example. That's not from God. That's a result of biology and the environment that we live in. So, yeah, I would agree that God is good.
Okay.
That's a good way to describe it.
How do you know that God exists?
How do I know God exists?
Yes.
Theologically, there are proofs for God's existence. For example, St. Thomas Aquinas talks about the proofs of God's existence. He gives the example of the unmoved mover, which is if I put my phone here on this table, it's not going to move unless, I move it. So nothing just happens.
Yes.
You have to go from what moved this phone, and this is another proof that he gives also from this, what moved this phone to what moved me to what moved my parents to my grandparents to what started the world to what started the Big Bang.
Yes.
So that's an example of God's proof of God's existence. I'm not one of those who have had a big crazy experience that people have with God. I see God in things that I know they exist. When I look at the human body, for example, and I see one cell, and I see how that cell is so intricately designed to do what it's supposed to do. I see a sunset, and I think, wow, that has to be God's presence. I think of people being kind to one another and seeing God in that. So that's why I personally believe in God. That's why I theologically believe in God. And once you take that leap of faith to say, okay, I believe in God, then the theology, then the belief, and the belief system comes later. So.
Yes, I know. Like in class, we learned about the 5 beliefs of God.
Oh, yeah. St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yes.
Very good guy.
And then, how would you defend against Gonello's criticism of the Lost Island? Basically, Gonello says, if God is the greatest thought to ever exist, I can have an island that's the greatest to ever exist. How do I know that actually exists? Because everybody has their own opinion of God, like their own thought of God. If I have my own island, you could have a different island. Everybody could be different.
Yeah. And the problem with that is he's trying to make it a personal thing. Yes, our relationship with God is personal, it's important. But what we forget is that God is something. I don't want to say being because that's not what he is. The fact is that God exists, and we have that with logic. So the person's image of God and what they see God as may be different, and whether they have the greatest island in their mind. But theologically speaking, we know that God exists, and that God is real, and the way you want to view him is up to you, kind of thing. Now, that's probably a lot of people would disagree with me on that, but that's how I see it.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Did I